Have you ever wondered why the history of the world feels like a puzzle with its most vital pieces missing? What if I told you that the sun we see every day once tried to wipe us out, and the only thing that saved humanity was a secret hidden in the heart of Africa? Today, we are pulling back the veil on a forbidden celestial war, the day the sun god fought the moon god, a moment that didn't just change the sky, but rearranged the very DNA of human spirituality. We're diving deep into the ancient Kingdom of Dahomey to uncover the truth about Mawu Lisa, the dual deity of creation, and the cosmic coup that mainstream history is too afraid to mention. This isn't just a myth, it's the blueprint of our own internal struggle between power and peace. In this story, you'll discover why the darkness we've been taught to fear is actually the only thing that can keep the light from becoming a consuming fire. This revelation changes everything about how we see our past, our politics, and our own souls. Before we reveal how this ancient shadow still influences the world you live in today, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell. We are reclaiming the stories they tried to burn. This is a journey for the brave, for those who know that the truth is rarely found in the glare of the spotlight. From which corner of the globe are you joining us to witness this ancestral revelation? Drop your location in the comments and let's enter the shadows together. The ancient world wasn't built on the facts your history books love to parade around. It was held together by a fragile balance that modern science, in all its smugness, thinks it can explain with a few charts. In the savannas of Dahomey, time wasn't some ticking clock on a wall. It was the rhythmic breath of Lisa, the sun, and the silver touch of Mawu, the moon. They shared a single cosmic body, a duality governing the universe where not a single leaf hit the dirt without their joint nod, in an Africa that official maps still try to ignore. But let's be real. Perfection is a bit of a bore for gods with fire in their veins, and Lisa started feeling like his golden glow was just too brilliant to share with the shadows. He looked down and saw that heat was what made life throb, what melted the iron and forged the spears, and soon enough irony whispered that the sun should be the sole master. In the silence of the spirit realm, that perfect harmony started to crack, as Lisa's ego swelled like a dust storm threatening to choke out everything in its path. Legend has it the first sign of trouble wasn't in the stars, but in the sharp scent of ozone and scorched earth that drifted through fawn villages while animals bolted for no reason. The sun began to burn with a forbidden intensity, flat out, ignoring the cue to hand over the keys to Mawu's silver night, turning the twilight into a battlefield of impossible colors. It was the first rebellion, a divine coup where the masculine tried to overwrite the feminine, betting that raw power could replace the deep mystery and intuition of the dark. The ancient rituals of balance, passed down for ages, suddenly looked pretty useless against the golden fury devouring the horizon and drying up sacred wells. Priests stared up with burning eyes, trying to wrap their heads around why the cosmic contract was being shredded right in front of their white clay-painted faces. Ancestral mysticism was being put to the fire, and the wisdom linking heaven to earth trembled as the sun defied the very laws he helped write at the dawn of time. As Lisa roared his heat over the canopy, a strange phenomenon began to leave its mark on clay tablets and oral memories that would eventually cross oceans and centuries. What mainstream history calls a mere astronomical event was actually the moment the moon decided she wouldn't be erased, bracing herself for a collision that would redraw the map of the human soul. The tension in the air got so thick you could cut it with a bronze blade, setting the stage for the day the sky finally lost its color. In those days, the ground beneath the Dahomey palaces didn't just hold the weight of kings. It pulsed with a heavy, magnetic vibration that signaled the gods were no longer on speaking terms. The red earth, rich with iron, acted like a tuning fork for the celestial discord, making the very air feel like it was charged with a static that made people's hair stand on end. While historians might shrug this off as atmospheric pressure, the locals knew better. It was the weight of a kingdom caught between two lovers who had turned into rivals. Geographically, this was the heart of the world's spiritual engine, a place where the veil was so thin you could practically hear the stars grinding against each other. The myth goes that Lisa, the sun, decided to stage his grand takeover right at the peak of the rainy season, a time when Mawu's cooling touch was supposed to be law. It wasn't just a weather anomaly. It was a spiritual hijacking where the sun stayed pinned in the sky, refusing to set, turning the lush greenery into a brittle golden graveyard. This wasn't the nurturing light you see in children's books. It was a jealous, prying glare that sought to expose every secret hidden in the dark. The origin of this fight was rooted in the oldest sin of all, the belief that one half of a whole can survive without the other. To combat this blinding tyranny, the secret societies of the Fon began to perform rituals that haven't been whispered aloud in centuries. They used obsidian basins filled with stagnant water to trap the sun's reflection, trying to cool his ego with symbolic drownings, while chanting mantras that sounded more like ancient codes than prayers. They weren't just asking for rain, they were trying to recalibrate the cosmic frequency that Lisa had jammed with his solar roar. Every movement in these rituals was a calculated strike against the imbalance, using the very iron Lisa had gifted them to forge a spiritual cage for his pride. This was the moment the Great Erasure truly began, as the conflict forced a split in the human psyche that we still haven't healed today. The struggle wasn't just in the clouds, it moved into the bloodlines, as those who favored the sun's logic began to clash with the keepers of the moon's intuition. This wasn't some minor disagreement. It was a civil war of the soul that left scars on the African identity long before any outsider set foot on the coast. The conflict proved that even the gods can be petty, and that their domestic disputes often end up being the tragedies we call history. Just as the world seemed ready to ignite under Lisa's relentless gaze, a shadow began to creep from the edge of the world. Not a cloud, but a darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. It was the moon, Mawu, moving with a silent, terrifying grace to reclaim her half of the sky, her silver aura turning into a cold, black blade. This wasn't a peaceful transition. It was a celestial ambush that sent birds falling from the trees in mid-flight and turned the midday heat into a bone-chilling frost. Something was coming that no priest or king could stop, a cosmic collision that would leave a permanent mark on the sun itself. The eclipse wasn't just a shadow passing by, it was a violent collision of two realities that mainstream archaeology is too scared to touch. As the black disk of the moon bit into the sun's golden rim, the sky didn't just go dark. It turned a bruised metallic purple that made the shadows of the trees look like jagged teeth on the ground. This was the legendary Day of the Two Heads, a moment when the binary code of the universe glitched, revealing a terrifying glimpse of what lies behind the curtain of our perceived reality. In the sudden, eerie chill, the very concept of time seemed to liquefy, leaving the people of Dahomey standing in a frozen moment of pure, unadulterated awe. The symbols carved into the hidden shrines of the Ouida forest speak of this event as a spiritual correction, a cosmic reset that saved the earth from becoming a charred rock. While the sun, Lisa, represented the physical, the moon, Mawu, represented the soul, and their clash was the only way to ensure that neither the body nor the spirit would rule the other. We see echoes of this in the Eye of Horus in Egypt, or the yin and yang of the East, but the African root is far more visceral. It's the story of a god who had to be blinded to truly see. This secret knowledge suggests that the darkness we fear is actually the only thing that can keep the light from becoming a consuming fire. During this celestial battle, the legend says a third power emerged. Gu, the god of iron and transformation, who acted as the mediator between his warring parents. He forged a bridge of stardust and metal, a spiritual link that allowed the sun and moon to occupy the same space without destroying the world. This is the origin of the sacred middle path, a philosophy that the West later rebranded as moderation, but for the Fon, it was a survival tactic etched in the stars. Every piece of iron forged in the fires of Africa from that day on carried a bit of that cosmic tension, a reminder that peace is just a controlled state of war between opposites. But as the centuries rolled on, this sophisticated understanding of balance was systematically hunted down and labeled as witchcraft by those who wanted a world they could easily categorize. The colonizers didn't just want the land. They wanted to kill the idea that the moon, the feminine, the hidden, the African, had any power over the sun of their enlightenment. No, they tried to turn a story of cosmic partnership into a fable of superstition, hoping we'd forget that we are the children of both the fire and the shade. It's the ultimate irony. The very people who claim to be civilized are the ones who lost the manual on how to keep the universe from tearing itself apart. Today, that ancient battle still vibrates in the heartbeat of the diaspora, in the syncopated rhythms of jazz and the deep, bass-heavy pulse of the drums that refuse to be silenced. We live in a world that is dangerously sun-heavy, obsessed with visibility, growth, and the harsh light of constant surveillance, yet the moon still waits for her turn to speak. The day the sun fought the moon isn't a closed chapter in a dusty book. It's a living prophecy that warns us that whenever we tip the scales too far, the sky will eventually find a way to go black again. The scars on the sun are still there, if you know how to look, reminding us that the light only has meaning because the dark allows it to exist. The moment the two deities finally pulled apart, they didn't just leave a void in the sky, they created the very concept of the self within the human mind. Before this, humanity lived in a hazy, singular consciousness, unable to distinguish between the dream and the waking world. When Mawu and Lisa established their separate domains, it was as if a mirror was smashed, and for the first time, people looked at their own shadows and realized they were separate from the earth. This wasn't just a physical parting, it was the birth of the individual ego. An African revelation that the I only exists because there is a you to balance it. Visually, the priests described this as a shimmering silver cord that stretched between the sun and the moon, a spiritual umbilical cord that ensured they could never truly drift too far. In the temples of Benin, this is symbolized by the serpent of life, Da, who coils around the world to keep it from flying into pieces. It's quite the irony that modern psychology talks about the split brain and dual natures as if they discovered it in a lab, while West African ancestors were carving that exact duality into their wooden doors centuries ago. The separation was a gift of clarity, but it came with the heavy burden of choice. The rituals that followed were designed to bridge this new gap, using the language of the birds to communicate with the gods who now lived in different houses. Sacerdotes began to wear masks that were half gold and half silver, dancing in a way that mimicked the rotation of the stars to keep the cord from snapping. They knew that if humanity forgot its dual origin, we would become lopsided. Either too cold and detached like the moon, or too aggressive and burning like the sun. This cultural technology was the first defense mechanism against the madness of extremism, a lesson etched into the very fabric of the community's social structure. But as this new consciousness spread, so did the conflict between the children of the day and the keepers of the night. Secrets were divided. Some lineages were given the power to heal through the lunar herbs, while others were granted the solar secrets of the forge and the blade. This wasn't a peaceful division, but a strategic distribution of power that prevented any one group from becoming a god on Earth. The tension between these two paths created the first great schools of African mystery, where the truth was never one thing, but always a dialogue between two opposing whispers. Even today, we see the remnants of this split in the way we struggle to balance our public lives with our private souls. We are constantly trying to reconcile the Lisa in us, the one that wants to be seen and conquer, with the Mawu that craves the silence of the dark. The African masters of old didn't see this as a problem to be solved, but as a rhythm to be mastered, a cosmic heartbeat that keeps the universe alive. Yet, as the sun began to rise higher and more fiercely in the following era, a new shadow started to form, one that didn't come from the moon. The shift toward the sun's absolute reign didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, calculated burn that began to dry up the ancient, wet wisdom of the matriarchal lunar cults. As the great empires of the savannah grew, the leaders found that the harsh, uncompromising logic of Lisa, the sun, was much easier to use for building armies than the fluid, mysterious dreams of Mawu. It's funny how progress always seems to involve cutting down the trees that provide the best shade, trading the cool complexity of the night for a singular, blinding truth. This was the first time Africa felt the bite of centralization, as the solar kings began to demand that every prayer be directed toward the light. Archaeologists often stumble upon strange, blackened ruins in the sub-Saharan belt that they conveniently label as unexplained fire pits, but the oral records tell a different story. These were sites of the Great Quenching, where the artifacts of the moon, the silver mirrors, and the ivory carvings of the feminine divine were systematically melted down or buried deep beneath the sand. It was a cultural lobotomy, an attempt to erase the idea that the dark was a place of creation rather than just a place to hide. The irony is that by trying to kill the shadow, these rulers only made the sun's glare more unbearable for the common man. In the secret chambers of the remaining moon priests, a new kind of resistance was forged, the spirit of the hidden. They realized that if they couldn't stop the sun from shining, they would become the masters of the under-earth, creating symbols that looked like solar icons but held lunar secrets. This is where the true hidden history begins, a subtext of rebellion where every bead and every weave in a kente cloth became a coded message of the old balance. They turned their spirituality into a guerrilla war, proving that you can't actually kill a god that lives in the very rhythm of the tides and the blood. This era saw the rise of the Iron Prophets, men and women who claimed that the only way to survive the sun's tyranny was to become as hard and unyielding as the metal they pulled from the ground. They began to preach a prophecy of a second eclipse, a time when the world would get so hot and so arrogant that the moon would be forced to return and swallow the light once more. This wasn't a threat of doom, but a promise of a return to grace. A spiritual revolution that would restore the cooling waters of intuition to a parched and weary humanity. As these prophecies spread like wildfire through the trade routes, reaching as far as the banks of the Nile and the edges of the Sahara, the established powers grew desperate to silence the moon talkers. They didn't realize that by persecuting the followers of Mawu, they were only driving the silver wisdom deeper into the soul of the people, making it indestructible. The conflict was no longer just in the heavens, it was a battle for the very memory of the African continent, setting the stage for a mystery that would remain buried for 1,000 years. But, as we know, what is buried in African soil has a habit of breathing through the cracks when the world least expects it. The heavy silence that followed the suppression of the moon cults didn't mean the wisdom was dead. It just went underground, literally. In the subterranean cities and hidden rock shelters of the Dogon and the Fon, the priests began to map the stars with a precision that makes modern telescopes look like toys. They weren't just looking at the sky, they were tracking the dark sister of the sun, a celestial body that official science only recently discovered. It's a bit rich that we call it discovery when it was etched into the walls of African caves thousands of years ago. A silent testament to a people who saw with more than just their eyes. These hidden maps were more than just astronomy. They were spiritual blueprints for a time when the world would lose its way. The artifacts found in these sites, strange polarized crystals and shadow clocks, reveal a technology of the soul that balanced the solar energy of the body with the lunar energy of the mind. They believed that a human being without moon sight was like a predator without a conscience, a creature of pure appetite and no reflection. This was the prohibited science of Africa, a knowledge of frequencies and vibrations that could heal or destroy, kept in trust for a generation that would be strong enough to use it. The connection between these African star keepers and the builders of the pyramids is a thread that the history books are desperate to snap. There is an unmistakable irony in the way scholars obsess over the sun kings of Egypt, while ignoring the moon mothers of the south, who provided the spiritual math for those monuments. The symbols found in the ruins of Great Zimbabwe and the tombs of the Meroe kings whisper the same secret, that the true power of a civilization isn't how much it builds, but how much it remembers. They weren't just building structures. They were building anchors to keep the earth connected to the celestial rhythm of Mawu Lisa. As the shadow of foreign invasion finally loomed on the horizon, these keepers of the flame made a monumental decision to sleep. They didn't fight with iron spears against guns. They withdrew their knowledge into the spirit of the mask, hiding the most profound secrets of the eclipse within dances and songs that appeared primitive to the invaders. It was the ultimate Trojan horse of the soul. The conquerors took the land, but they could never colonize the frequency of the ancestors. The secret of the sun and moon was locked away in a safe that no key could open. Only a heartbeat could trigger. This grand hiding is why even today you can find a village in the heart of the continent where a simple ceremony holds more cosmic truth than a 1,000-page textbook. The forbidden part of this history isn't that it's dangerous, but that it's powerful enough to make people realize they've been living in a half-lit world. The sun still fights the moon every day in our global politics and our personal anxieties. But the old ones are still there, sitting in the shadows, waiting for us to remember how to listen to the dark. The story hasn't ended. It's just waiting for the next time the light fails to show us what's truly there. The shift in the world's energy wasn't just a change in weather. It was a fundamental rewiring of how we perceive authority and gender. As the sun's logic, rigid, hierarchical, and visible, became the global standard, the fluid and communal moon governance of the ancient African clans was mocked as weakness. It's quite the irony that modern society prides itself on transparency while being more blinded by the glare of its own ego than ever before. This wasn't an accident. It was a strategic dismantling of the African social fabric, which once understood that a king, Lisa, was nothing without the spiritual validation of the Queen Mother, Mawu. In the hidden archives of the Vodou orders, there are scrolls made of treated animal skin that describe the curse of the single eye. It's a prophecy about a future where men would only see what is directly in front of them, losing the peripheral vision of the spirit that allows for empathy and foresight. They warned that a world ruled only by the sun would eventually burn itself out, driven by an insatiable hunger for more without the moon's wisdom of enough. This spiritual diagnosis of our modern crisis was written in the dust of the Sahel, long before the first factories began to choke the sky with smoke. The connection between this solar tyranny and the rise of the Atlantic slave trade is a dark thread that many historians are too uncomfortable to pull. When the balance was broken in the heavens, it broke on the ground. People became resources to be extracted by the light of day, rather than souls to be nurtured in the sanctuary of the night. The invaders didn't just bring chains for the body, they brought a sun-only religion that sought to bleach the colorful, nocturnal complexity of African spirituality into a monochrome of fear and submission. Yet, even in the hull of those ships, the silver rhythm of Mawu continued to beat in the secret pulses of the captives. This is the forbidden parallel, the realization that the colonization of Africa was, in fact, an attempt to colonize the moon itself, to colonize the feminine, the intuitive, and the subconscious. They wanted a world where everything had a price and a label, a world where the mystery of the eclipse was replaced by the cold flicker of the ledger. But the irony is that the more they tried to suppress the night wisdom, the more it leaked into the very foundations of the new world, hiding in the blues, in the sanctified dances, and in the roots of the Americas. The moon was never captured, she just changed her reflection. Now, as we stand at the edge of a global fever, the ancient struggle between the sun and the moon is reaching a new fever pitch. We are seeing a desperate worldwide longing for the cooling waters of ancestral knowledge, as the heat of our modern systems becomes unbearable. This isn't just about identity or politics, it's about a biological and spiritual necessity to return to the balance that the Fon priests died to protect. The question isn't whether the moon will return to claim her place. The question is whether we will be brave enough to step out of the blinding light and learn to see in the dark again. The archaeological world was rocked a few decades ago by the discovery of impossible artifacts in the West African forest belt. Tiny, intricate brass spheres that shouldn't exist according to the timeline of primitive development. These aren't just ornaments, they are physical maps of the solar system, centered not on the Earth, but on the gravitational dance between two opposing forces. It's almost laughable how experts call these items ritualistic toys, refusing to admit that the ancestors of the Dahomey had a grasp of orbital mechanics that makes the Enlightenment look like a kindergarten class. These artifacts are the silent witnesses to a time when African science and spirituality were the same breath, a secret history buried under layers of colonial denial. The true conflict of the sun and moon wasn't just a battle in the clouds, it was a war over the seat of the soul, the pineal gland, which the ancient Fon called the mirror of Mawu. They believed that Lisa, the sun, provides the energy for the body to move, but Mawu, the moon, provides the frequency for the mind to perceive other dimensions. When the balance was lost, humanity's inner eye began to calcify, leaving us trapped in a three-dimensional prison where we only believe what we can touch. This spiritual blinding was the ultimate goal of those who wanted to rule the world. For a people who cannot see, the spirits of the night are easily led by the masters of the day. In the deep rituals of the Zangbeto, the guardians of the night, the secret of the eclipse is still reenacted through spinning hay structures that seem to move by their own volition. These night watchmen are the living remnants of the lunar army, tasked with protecting the community from the solar madness of greed and ego. The visual of a spinning vortex of straw in the middle of a dark village is a powerful image of the moon's hidden power, a force that is invisible yet moves everything. This isn't folklore for the sake of tourism, it's a sophisticated social technology used to maintain a psychological equilibrium that the modern West hasn't even begun to understand. The irony of our modern information age is that we have never been more ignorant of the celestial currents that actually dictate our moods, our health, and our destiny. We live under artificial lights that mimic the sun 24/7, trying to force a laser state of constant production, while our Mawu soul starves in the background, leading to the global epidemic of burnout and anxiety. The African prophecy of the Day of Fire wasn't about a literal volcano, but about a civilization that forgets how to rest, how to dream, and how to honor the dark. We are currently living through the fever that the ancient priests warned would happen if the moon was ever truly sidelined. As the red dust of Africa continues to settle on the cars of Europe and the Americas, carried by the trade winds, it brings with it the microscopic memory of the sun and moon's struggle. Every time the sky turns a hazy orange during a Saharan dust storm, the ancestors are reminding us that the Earth is a single, breathing organism that doesn't care about our borders or our official histories. The secrets are in the wind, in the iron in our blood, and in the rhythm of the tides that the moon still pulls with a silent iron grip. The battle of Mawu and Lisa is happening inside you right now, and the only question is, which god are you feeding at the expense of the other? The heavy influence of the sun god Lisa didn't just change the sky, it gave birth to the cult of the individual, a way of living that prioritized personal glory over the collective pulse of the tribe. Before this cosmic rift, the concept of private property or exclusive truth was as foreign as snow in the tropics, because everyone understood they were part of a shared, dualistic flow. But as the sun's glare intensified, people began to build fences, not just around their land, but around their minds, mirroring the isolation of a star that refuses to share its horizon. This was the moment the African Renaissance of old was frozen, as the communal moon mind was pushed to the fringes of the village, surviving only in the hushed whispers of the grandmothers. There's a profound irony in the way modern success coaches and power brokers talk about owning the day, completely unaware that they are following a script written by a disgruntled sun deity thousands of years ago. The ancient Fon records mention a sickness of the light, a condition where a person becomes so visible and so famous that they lose their shadow, and with it, their humanity. They saw the moon's darkness not as something to be feared, but as a spiritual cooling system that prevented the heart from turning into a dry husk of ambition. To them, a person who couldn't sit in the dark and listen to the ancestors was effectively a walking ghost, a body without a navigation system. In the hidden valleys of the Atakora Mountains, there are still lineages of shadow weavers who maintain the old balance through the creation of sacred textiles that can only be dyed by moonlight. They believe that the blue and purple pigments derived from certain plants carry a lunar vibration that can calm the solar fevers of the blood, acting as a physical anchor for Mawu's grace. These fabrics are more than just clothing. They are portable sanctuaries designed to protect the wearer from the psychic noise of a world that has gone sun-mad. This is the ultimate forbidden fashion, a wearable technology that regulates the soul's frequency in an increasingly chaotic world. The connection between this ancestral coolness and the modern concept of cool in the diaspora is one of the most brilliant survival stories ever told. When the Sun Kings of the West tried to strip the captives of their dignity, the ancestors taught them how to be cool, a state of inner lunar calm that no amount of solar heat or external pressure could break. This coolness is the direct descendant of Mawu's silver peace, a way of maintaining one's center when the world around you is literally or figuratively on fire. It is the secret weapon of African resilience, a spiritual air conditioning that allows the soul to survive the harshest environments. As we look toward the future, the prophecy of the two suns suggests that we are approaching a crossroads, where we will either embrace the moon's return or be consumed by our own artificial glare. We are seeing a global eclipse of the old systems, as the rigid structures of the sun begin to crumble under the weight of their own heat. making room for a more fluid, intuitive way of being. This isn't just about going back to the past. It's about remembering forward, using the ancient map of Mawu Lisa to navigate a world that has lost its sense of direction. The silver light is growing stronger every night, and for those with the eyes to see, the true history of the world is finally starting to emerge from the shadows. The scars left by the clash between Lisa and Mawu eventually manifested in a physical miracle that the civilized world refuses to categorize. The birth of the Govi, or the sacred earthen jars that are said to hold the captured breath of the gods. These aren't just pottery, they are ancient capacitors of energy, designed to store the excess solar radiation that Lisa leaked during his tantrum, neutralized by the cooling clay of the earth. It is a delicious irony that while modern scientists scramble to find a way to store clean energy, West African priests have been using spirit batteries for millennia to keep their villages in metaphysical balance. These jars are the physical proof that the war in the heavens left behind a residue of power that can still be tapped by those who know the right frequency. In the hidden corridors of the Smithsonian and the British Museum, there are bronze plaques from the Benin and Dahomey empires that depict the sun and moon not as distant orbs, but as intimate, warring lovers. If you look closely at the forbidden sections of these artifacts, you'll see symbols of a black sun, a solar force that has been eclipsed so perfectly it becomes a gateway to the void. This is the secret the world isn't ready for, that the ultimate power isn't in the light or the dark, but in the event horizon between them. The ancestors didn't worship the sun, they worshipped the intersections, the betwixt and between, where all true creation happens. A concept that makes the binary logic of Western religion look like a child's drawing. This intersection wisdom is what allowed the African diaspora to survive the most brutal solar tyranny in human history, chattel slavery. While the overseer's whip was the physical manifestation of Lisa's unchecked fire, the captives found their sanctuary in the hush harbors, the dark swamps and moonlit clearings where the spirit of Mawu could breathe. They were reenacting the original battle, using the cover of night to rebuild the souls that the day had tried to break. This is the subterranean freedom, a realization that as long as you have the moon in your heart, no Sun King can ever truly own you. It's the ultimate spiritual rebellion, fueled by a celestial conflict that took place before the first pyramids were even a thought. Today, the modern sun is trying to conquer the final frontier, our sleep, our dreams and our private thoughts through the blue light of our screens. We are being force-fed a digital version of Lisa's arrogance, a world where the sun never sets and we are always on, always visible and always being tracked. This is the technological solar flare that the old fond prophecies warned about, a time when the light would become a cage. But the irony is that the more lit our world becomes, the more the soul naturally gravitates toward the dark wisdom of the ancestors, seeking the cool, refreshing silence that only Mawu can provide. As the magnetic poles of the earth begin to shift and our weather patterns become as chaotic as a god's argument, we are being forced to realize that we are not the masters of this planet. We are merely the audience to a much larger, much older drama that is currently reaching its climax. The day the sun fought the moon is a reminder that the universe doesn't owe us a steady horizon. It owes us a cycle, and cycles require both the burn and the frost. The story of Africa is the story of a continent that has already survived the end of the world once, and if we listen to the red earth, we might just learn how to do it again. The ancient Fon tell of a great reset that happened in the aftermath of the solar war, a moment when the very vibration of the earth changed to accommodate the new distance between the gods. This wasn't just a spiritual shift, it was a physical recalibration of the African soil, creating what we now call power spots, geological anomalies where the magnetic field still echoes the tension of Mawu and Lisa's parting. It is a bit of a cosmic joke that modern geologists look at these areas as mere mineral deposits or fault lines, completely blind to the fact that they are standing on the scars of a divine divorce. These locations remain the secret batteries of the continent, pulsing with a frequency that can either heal a soul or shatter a mind, depending on which god you carry inside you. In the hidden oral lineages of the water talkers, there is a revelation that the Atlantic Ocean itself is the ultimate witness to this celestial struggle. They believe the tides are not just pulled by the moon's gravity, but are the rhythmic tears of Mawu as she remembers her lost unity with the sun. This oceanic memory is why the African spirit remained so fluid and indestructible during the Middle Passage. They weren't just crossing water, they were traveling through the very medium of their goddess's grief and power. The irony is that the New World was built on the backs of people who held the keys to the tides in their blood, while their masters struggled to even navigate the surface of the waves. The artifacts that represent this final stage of the myth are the double-headed axes of Shango and the divided masks of the Gelede, which show a face split perfectly between a smile and a snarl, light and shadow. These aren't art pieces for a museum shelf. They are spiritual anchors designed to keep the human psyche from drifting into the madness of one-sidedness. The ancestors knew that a man who only knows the light becomes a tyrant, and a man who only knows the dark becomes a ghost. This prohibited psychology taught that the goal of life isn't to be good or enlightened, but to be whole, to carry both the sun's fire and the moon's frost without being consumed by either. As we move deeper into an era of artificial intelligence and synthetic realities, the sun god's ultimate dream of total control seems almost within reach. We are building a digital Lisa world, where everything is mapped, tagged and exposed to the harsh glare of data, leaving no room for the Mawu secrets of the heart. But the irony is that the more perfectly we try to light the world, the more the ancient shadow forces begin to leak through the cracks of our technology. The ghost in the machine is nothing more than the moon spirit reclaiming the space we tried to take from her, reminding us that the dark will always find a way back in through the very tools we use to exclude it. The story of the day the sun. Fought the moon is the story of your own life, the eternal tug-of-war between your ambition and your peace, your public mask and your private truth. Africa hasn't lost its history. It has simply outlived the people who tried to simplify it into a fairy tale. The red dust of the savannah, the iron in your veins, and the silver glow of the moon tonight are all part of the same vibrating string of reality that Mawu and Lisa plucked at the beginning of time. The war is over. The balance is set, and the only thing left to do is to decide if you are brave enough to walk the middle path, where the sun and moon meet in a permanent golden-purple twilight. The final secret held by the Fon elders isn't about a war that ended, but a balance that must be maintained by every soul walking the earth today. They believe that we are currently living in the Great Dusk, a period where the sun's ego has reached its limit and the moon is preparing to take her rightful place beside him once more. It's a bit ironic that we look for signs of the apocalypse in movies and headlines, while the real shift is happening in the quiet moments when people choose intuition over raw power. This isn't the end of the world. It's the end of a world that refused to acknowledge its own shadow, a necessary cooling of a planet that has been running a fever for too long. In the deep bush of West Africa, there are still keepers of the pulse, who perform the last ritual of the day, a simple act of pouring water onto the dry earth to symbolize the reconciliation of Lisa's heat and Mawu's moisture. This isn't just tradition for the sake of nostalgia. It's a sophisticated act of grounding the planet's energy, a spiritual lightning rod that prevents the celestial conflict from tearing the social fabric apart. They aren't praying for a miracle. They are being the miracle, acting as the human bridge between the fire and the frost. This is the ultimate forbidden responsibility, the realization that the gods don't keep the world in balance. We do. The Mawu-Lisa duality is the hidden foundation of the modern African identity, a resilience that says, I can burn like the sun in the face of oppression, and I can heal like the moon in the silence of my home. This psychological flexibility is the real reason why African culture has influenced every corner of the globe, from the syncopated beats of New Orleans to the resistance movements of the Caribbean. We are seeing a global re-Africanization of the spirit, as people everywhere realize that the sun-only path leads to a desert, while the dual path leads to a garden. It's a bit of a slap in the face to those who called these beliefs primitive, only to find themselves begging for the same wisdom centuries later. As the magnetic fields of our reality continue to wobble, the day the sun fought the moon serves as the ultimate map for navigating the chaos of the 21st century. The story teaches us that conflict isn't a disaster, but a catalyst for growth, provided you don't let one side win completely. The forbidden truth is that we don't need to defeat our shadows. We need to dance with them, just as the moon dances with the sun during a total eclipse. This is the ancestral code that was hidden in plain sight, waiting for a generation that was exhausted enough by the light to finally appreciate the value of the dark. So as the sky turns that familiar shade of purple tonight, remember that you are witnessing a ceasefire that has lasted for eons. The iron in your blood and the dreams in your head are the living artifacts of a divine collision that never truly stopped. The history they gave you was a flat, sun-bleached lie, but the story you feel in your bones is a deep, moonlit truth. The gods are no longer fighting in the sky. They are waiting for you to find the intersection where they can finally become one again, right there in the center of your own soul. The visual of a total eclipse, where a black sun is surrounded by a halo of silver fire, isn't just a lucky alignment of rocks in space. It is the ultimate cosmic "I told you so." In the high altar traditions of the Fon, this moment represents the eye of the infinite, a brief window where the binary code of the universe pauses to breathe. It's a bit of a laugh that modern science treats this as a mere shadow play, while the ancient priests knew it was a portal where the rules of time and space briefly dissolve. When the sun and moon overlap, they create a frequency that can rewrite the destiny of an entire bloodline if one knows how to stand in that specific shadow with an open heart. The atmosphere during this purple noon turns into something thick and electric, a visual feast that would make a Hollywood director weep with envy. The birds go silent, the wind drops to a whisper, and the world is cast in a light that doesn't come from a single source, but seems to radiate from the ground itself. This is the secret light, a frequency that the sun god Lisa tried to hide from us, believing we weren't ready to handle the truth of our own divinity. For a few minutes, the hierarchy of the sky is destroyed, and the primitive African observer sees more than a NASA scientist ever will. But don't expect to find this in your standard history books, which are too busy obsessing over the Enlightenment to notice when the light actually failed. This celestial overlap was a strategic reset, a way for Mawu to remind her husband and us that power is only legitimate when it knows how to surrender. The symbols found in the hidden caves of the Atacora Mountains depict this crown of fire not as a king's gold, but as a wreath of thorns and stars, a warning that ultimate authority is a burden, not a prize. It was a visual prophecy of a world that would eventually lose its way by choosing the glare over the glow. The spiritual impact of this alignment on the human nervous system is something the ancient shadow keepers mapped out with terrifying precision. They believed that during the eclipse, the pineal gland, the seed of Mawu, could finally see through the solar illusions of the material world. It was a time for forbidden upgrades, where the soul could download centuries of ancestral wisdom in a single heartbeat of darkness. While the rest of the world hid in fear, the African initiates stood tall, bathing in the radiation of the black sun to harden their spirits for the long, bright centuries of trial ahead. As the moon slowly moves away and the first sliver of Lisa's heat returns, the world feels different, heavier, as if a great secret was whispered and then immediately forgotten by the masses. The crown of the black sun is the reminder that we are children of a union that is both violent and beautiful, a marriage of fire and frost that keeps the heart beating. But as the light returns to full strength, the struggle for power moves from the heavens down into the very halls of human governance. The battle in the sky may have paused, but the war for the soul of the people was just getting started. The 17th revelation concerns what we might call the political eclipse, a sophisticated system of checks and balances that would make modern democracies look like a playground scrap. In the ancient courts of Dahomey, the king, the solar authority, could never rule with absolute fire because he was always shadowed by the Queen Mother, the lunar voice of the ancestors. It's quite the irony that Western historians often painted these kingdoms as despotic, while their own kings were busy claiming divine right without a single lunar priestess to tell them to calm down. The African political engine ran on the friction between these two poles, ensuring that no single ego could ever burn the entire nation to a crisp. This balance was physically anchored in the architecture of the palaces, where the sunroom of public decree was always balanced by a moon chamber of private reflection and spiritual veto. Visually, this was a world of sharp contrasts. The brilliant gold of the king's regalia during the day and the cool, silent ivory of the Queen Mother's council at night. While the world thinks of power as a straight line, the Faun knew it was a circle that had to pass through the dark to remain legitimate. It was a visual and social masterpiece of stability designed to prevent the solar madness of unchecked ambition from ever taking root in the red soil. The irony of the Enlightenment is that it actually darkened our understanding of how collective power should work, replacing this dual African wisdom with a singular masculine obsession with hierarchy. The solar model of one God, one king, one truth was forced upon the continent like a spiritual straitjacket, trying to bleach out the nuanced shadows of the old lunar councils. They wanted a world where the sun never set on their empires, forgetting that a world without sunset is a world that eventually turns into a desert. This wasn't progress. It was a systematic dismantling of the most stable political technology the human race had ever devised. In the secret archives of the Vodou orders, there are scrolls that describe the curse of the Sun King, a prophecy about leaders who would become so bright they would blind their own people. They foresaw a time when the lunar voices, the women, the healers, the dreamers, would be pushed to the margins, leaving the world to be governed by pure, unreflective heat. This spiritual diagnosis explains the global fever of our modern politics, where everyone is shouting under the glare of the spotlight, but nobody is listening in the cool of the shade. We traded the sophisticated Eclipse governance for a noisy, solar-powered chaos that is currently melting its own foundations. As the old lunar councils were driven underground, they didn't disappear. They became the hidden hand that guided the resistance across the seas and through the centuries. The memory of the dual crown stayed alive in the secret societies, waiting for the day when the sun's glare would become so unbearable that the world would beg for the moon's return. The irony is that we are now living in that exact moment, watching the solar systems crumble while we desperately look for a way back to the balance. But the final secret isn't in the halls of Parliament. It's hidden in the final mystery of how this cosmic war actually ends within you. The 18th and most forbidden truth is that the day the sun fought the moon wasn't a one-time event in the distant past. It is a recurring software update for the human spirit that happens every time you close your eyes. We've been conditioned to look at the sky for signs of the gods, but the real battlefield is the iron in your blood and the pineal gland in your brain. It's a bit of a laugh that we spend billions searching for alien life or cosmic origins, while ignoring the fact that we carry the exact frequency of Mawu and Lisa's divorce in our own DNA. The history they gave you was a flat, sun-bleached lie designed to make you forget that you are the living intersection of a celestial war. This final mystery reveals that the eclipse is actually a state of being, a purple consciousness where the logic of the day and the intuition of the night finally stop trying to kill each other. In the deepest African mystery schools, the initiate is taught that to be enlightened is a trap. You must be whole, which means embracing the dark as much as the light. Visually, this is represented by the secret eye found on ancient Benin bronzes, an eye that sees through the illusions of the physical world by balancing solar energy and lunar frequency. It is the ultimate spiritual rebellion, refusing to be just one thing in a world that demands you choose a side. The irony of our modern existence is that we are terrified of the very darkness that holds our greatest power, running toward the nearest LED screen to avoid the silence of Mawu's embrace. We have become solar refugees, fleeing from our own depths because we've been told that the night is where the monsters live, forgetting that the monsters are usually just the parts of ourselves we've refused to light properly. The ancient Fon priests didn't fear the dark. They respected it as the womb of the sun, the place where every new idea and every revolution is quietly forged before it ever hits the light. By reclaiming this space, you aren't just remembering Africa. You are reclaiming the half of your soul that was stolen by a sun-only history. The connection between this internal balance and the global Great Reset is the final piece of the puzzle that the powers that be are desperate to keep hidden. If humanity ever realized that we don't need a solar king or a digital algorithm to tell us how to live, the entire hierarchy of the modern world would collapse overnight. This is why the stories of Mawu Lisa were labeled as myths or superstition, not because they are false, but because they are the most dangerous truths ever told. They remind us that the power to balance the world doesn't come from a ballot box or a bank account, but from the individual's ability to master the eclipse within themselves. So as we reach the end of this ancestral journey, the red dust of the savannah begins to settle, revealing a horizon that is no longer just gold or silver, but a vibrant, shimmering purple. The battle in the sky has reached a ceasefire, but the story is now in your hands, vibrating in the rhythm of your heart and the depth of your dreams. You are the descendant of a cosmic collision, a child of fire and frost, and the heir to a secret that has outlived every empire that tried to bury it. The sun and the moon are watching, waiting to see if you will finally step into the twilight and claim your full inheritance. The red dust of the savannah eventually settles, but the echo of the great collision remains, vibrating in the very air you breathe. This story was never about a war in the sky. It was about the eternal rhythm of the universe that refuses to be silenced by the passing of centuries or the ink of conquerors. We are the living archives of Mawu and Lisa, carrying the heat of the sun in our ambition and the cool of the moon in our secrets. The balance they forged in the heavens is a gift they left for us to master. A reminder that there is no growth without the fire and no peace without the shade. As you step away from this revelation, do not think of this history as something dead and buried under the sand. The Forbidden Africa is not a place on a map, but a frequency of the soul that awakens every time you choose wholeness over division. The secrets of the Dahomey, the geometry of the stars, and the iron in your blood are all parts of a sacred tapestry that is still being woven. The ancient ones are not gone. They are waiting in the shadows of the great dusk, watching to see if we will finally have the courage to honor both the light and the dark. This journey through the hidden myths of the continent is just the beginning of a much larger awakening. Many mysteries still sleep beneath the earth and within the silent rhythms of the drum, waiting for the right moment to breathe once more. Carry this coolness with you, for in a world that is increasingly on fire, the ability to find your lunar center is the ultimate act of rebellion. The sky will inevitably go black again one day, not as a threat, but as an invitation to see what the light has been hiding from us all along. If this ancestral secret resonated with your spirit, ensure you are subscribed and your notifications are active so you do not miss the next forbidden chapter of our history. We are reclaiming the memory of a world that was never meant to be forgotten, and your presence is a vital part of this spiritual restoration. Respect the past, master your present, and never fear the shadows, for that is where the most powerful truths are born.